Nadia. Thank you for having me here. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be part of this amazing Congreso Futuro. So artificial intelligence, it's now everywhere around us. There's so much excitement around it. But what is, first of all, AI? And what is this area of generative AI? Tools like ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion, all of these models that you may have interacted with. You may have used ChatGPT to ask it questions. You may have used Stable Diffusion and other models to generate images. That's what is the role of generative AI now in this world. So let's first get some definitions in place. So intelligence is the ability to learn and adapt to surroundings based on that, right? So we are intelligent beings. We learn as we grow up, and we adapt to our environments. And AI, or artificial intelligence, is machines being able to learn from data and also make decisions based on that. Now, generative AI, as I mentioned, is a special class of AI where we are able to generate new samples of text. So I give a prompt or an instruction to ChatGPT, I can generate paragraphs of text. It can tell new jokes, it can write poems, it can write even software programs, can write emails. So you tell it something, an instruction of what to do, and it gives you that text. Stable diffusion, you give a text prompt, you ask it to generate a hibiscus flower, it's able to generate such a flower. Right? But we don't need to be limited to only text and images. We can generate new molecules which can become useful drugs, new medicines that could cure diseases. You can generate all kinds of different objects that go beyond just text and images. And that's where it's very useful for science and engineering. So generative AI can have a huge impact in creating better scientific research and transforming the way we do science, leading to even unimaginable new discoveries and inventions. So what makes generative AI so exciting is its ability to generate something new. And that's different from the AI you may have seen in the past decade, where the goal was to instead reason what's in an image or understand what's in a text paragraph. So it was the inverse process. There we were given an image, for instance, to recognize faces, and you had to recognize whose face it is. On the other hand, with generative AI, we are able to even generate new faces and all kinds of other images. And that's what makes it both exciting, and it's possible in this now realm of big models that require lots of training and also lots of training data. So computational power and data coming together has made generative AI possible. And so let's go a little bit deeper into text models. So language or text models are trained using a very simple notion. So you train these models to accurately predict the next word in a sentence. So you take all this data that's available on the internet, right, and you show it to this text model, and during training, it learns to accurately predict the next word. Of course, there's lots of ways to complete a sentence, and that's why this is what we call a probabilistic model, meaning there are many different possibilities, and you can only guess what are the likelihoods or probabilities of completing a sentence. But it turns out this by itself is not enough for language models to correctly follow our instructions when we interact with it as a chatbot. And that's where we need this additional part of what we call reinforcement learning. It's similar to how you train a dog. If you've had a dog, you give it treats, right? That's reinforcement, and it learns to do the tricks you like it to do. And similarly with the language model, we give it a positive reward whenever it aligns with our human feedback. So why now just limit only to text models? As I said, the future of AI is physical, right? It goes beyond just the virtual realm of only text models. And for it to be physical, what we would like it to do is have an embodiment. So meaning it also has a body along with a mind. And they need to come together. And we see that in robotics. For instance, in this project that I'm showing you, what we are doing is a pick and place. So the robotic arm is picking up a certain object and placing it in another one as the instruction shows. But what's different from the robotics of the past is now you can give it text instructions. So it's not just limited to doing one specific task. It can now be flexible. You give it text instructions of many different possibilities. And that is then used to execute in this robot in different tasks. And this kind of generalization, so now we have a robot that can generally do many things. That's where we are now seeing it as sparks of AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And that is now with embodiment. So we're having a robot do these kinds of complex tasks. And we can also do that in virtual worlds. So Minecraft is a game where you can do a lot of different activities. You can build castles, you can slay dragons. So it's what we call open-ended and creative. So you don't just finish the game, right? You can keep playing and keep adding new structures in this game. And we used language models to have an agent that interacts with language models and learns to play Minecraft effectively and progressively learns better skills. And these kind of AI agents are what we call never-ended learning. So meaning it continues to always learn. And that's almost like humans, right? We continue to learn and improve, and we would like our AI agents to also do that. So if they're learning on their own, there are so many tasks they would be able to solve. And we can use that in all kinds of applications, whether it's like web applications, filling up certain forms on websites, completing tasks, booking airline tickets. We can do all that now in an automated way with the use of language models, but AI agents that interact with these language models repeatedly to solve these complex tasks. And with this, we now no longer need to limit to just standard tasks. We can also do science, math, and engineering with AI. So one area we've been exploring is how AI can help mathematicians prove theorems. In fact, there are so many famous unproven theorems, meaning no mathematician has still been able to come up with a proof. So can AI one day prove these very hard theorems? In order to build it up to that, what we would like for AI to do is not just be learning to complete sentences, but also to prove step by step these different theorems, right, from the theorems we already know. And what you see is that those step by step is where every step has to be correct. So while proving a theorem, if you make a mistake anywhere in between, everything after that is garbage, right? You haven't succeeded in proving the theorem. So we cannot use standard language models like ChatGPT as is, because they're prone to what we call hallucinations. So hallucinations are where the language models are making mistakes. They're claiming a proof is correct even though it's not. And that's not useful for mathematicians because we would like to prove correct theorems. So what we've done is a project where we've used language models with certain tools that can verify each step of the proof to be correct or not. And so this way, we can remove the hallucinations seen in language models. And they've now become 100% accurate and continue to prove new theorems as they learn better. So this is an approach where you can use now language models, but remove the errors they're making and make it useful for mathematicians to prove theorems. And in fact, we built what we call a co-pilot, a framework where you can now use these language models along with human input. So it's human-AI collaboration. And that's the future in so many areas. So we need these co-pilots, and now we've also built that for math, which can be one of the big hallmarks of intelligence is reasoning and being able to prove more and more complex theorems. So this is a very exciting goal for us to see if one day we could get it to prove some theorems that are open and the proof is unknown. So it's not just in math we can use language models. We can use them to learn the code of life itself, which is genome sequences. We are all made up of DNA and RNA, right? So these is a code through which we are all built. And so what we asked was if we could take these different genome sequences and ask the model to learn how to complete these sequences, what kind of new sequences could emerge? So can the now model generate new organisms, new mutations? So we took all the known viral and bacterial genomes. So the known viruses, bacteria, whose genome sequences are present in a biobank. We took that, we trained the model, and then we asked it to generate new sequences. And in this visualization, you will see that there is the coronavirus. We would like to see how it evolves over the pandemic and beyond. So during training, we only showed it the variants of the first year, the alpha and beta variants that appeared in the first year. And then we asked it to generate new possible sequences. So it successfully generated the mutations that arrived later, such as the Delta and Omicron. So it's able to predict the evolution of the pandemic. And so this means for current and future pandemics, we can be better prepared. We can be better prepared with designing vaccines and drugs of viruses and bacteria before they appear in the real world. And that's going to be enormously transformative in terms of how we deal with public health. So, okay, we have these language models generate these sequences. But how do we judge among all these different possible mutations, which are the ones that are most concerning for the public, right, for our health? In order to do that, you cannot just look at sequences. You need to look at the whole mechanism itself. Meaning, in blue, what you see is what we call a spike protein of the virus. So part of the virus that goes into the human body and binds with other proteins in the human body. This kind of binding is what causes infection, right? So we have to judge how strong is this binding. And how do new mutations that you see here in yellow, like those are new mutations that have changed over the course of the viral evolution, how does that affect binding? And in order to do that, we need to not just look at a genome sequence, we need to look at different scales of interactive mechanisms of this binding. And in order to capture these different scales, we may need to go down even to quantum effects. So those effects impact binding and the infection and subsequently our health. So there's lots of such processes in nature that are governed by laws of physics. And we may know the mathematical equations for them, but on the other hand, it's extremely complicated to simulate them, very expensive. You can think of from molecular sequences that, or rather the binding process, to the prediction of the weather of our planet. And that involves mechanisms that happen at many different scales or resolutions. And in fact, to simulate those processes is extremely expensive as you increase the resolution. In fact, if we need to accurately predict how clouds move around this planet, which is an important component for determining climate change, right? What is the impact of increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? That requires us to model these clouds. And to do that to the accuracy we need today is impossible. It would require a supercomputer that is 100 billion times more powerful than the ones we have today. So given that it's out of reach, what is the solution? This is where we can turn to AI. AI can make these simulations so much faster than possible before. It can run on GPUs, right? These are accelerated computing that are much faster than standard computers. It can now learn from data and learn to simulate faster and better. And we see that in a number of settings. We developed AI methods known as neural operators that learn to simulate all kinds of complex processes. For instance, this example here is a fluid flow. How does the fluid, like water, move? And we are able to not just learn to predict at one fixed resolution, we can now predict at any resolution and do that accurately. And we can combine the known physics, of how these equations determine the flow of the liquid with the data that is available. And this kind of paradigm of physics-informed learning can really help us to accurately simulate these kind of complex processes. And we've used these methods in a number of areas. So we created the first high-resolution AI-based weather forecasting. And with that, we could accurately predict the weather on this planet, so global weather predictions, and do that about 45,000 times faster than the traditional weather models. So it's so much faster and cheaper to do. And it's now running in ECMWF, which is the premier weather agency. So you can go today to the chart at ECMWF and see what these models are predicting in real time. So this is not just a theoretical notion. This is something that's running in production. It is giving you weather forecasts, and it is something that is much cheaper than being able to do with traditional models. And this has a huge impact in terms of our abilities to do extreme weather forecasting. So extreme weather like hurricanes are very hard and in fact impossible to predict accurately. You cannot tell where exactly the hurricane will go. Instead, what you can do is slightly perturb or add noise to the current conditions and see where the path changes. With this, what you get is a probability estimate of how likely is the hurricane going to move to a certain region. And we can do this probabilistic assessments much more accurately because our models are so much cheaper to run compared to traditional models. We can also use AI to help mitigate climate change. In this example here, we're studying how carbon dioxide can be pumped into reservoirs underground. And we can determine how does the pressure build up as you pump carbon dioxide. And where would the carbon dioxide move over several decades as you store them in these underground reservoirs. This is important because that's how we can determine how much carbon dioxide can be removed, right? How do we get to the goal of achieving net zero and being able to mitigate climate change? And what AI models are able to do is make these simulations about 700,000 times faster. So you're getting these highly accurate simulations much faster and cheaper with AI than ever before. And we can also use these AI methods called neural operators in a number of other settings. In nuclear fusion, disruption is a big challenge. If we could handle that, we would have a net zero source of energy, right? It can solve a lot of the world's energy problems. Indeed, many challenges still remain, but AI is now able to help simulate these kinds of processes and detect that disruption can happen before it does. And hence, we can now handle this and look towards sustainable fusion. Many other examples, such as ultrasound imaging for medical imaging, right? So doing that in real time with AI because it's much faster. So AI is not just for simulations, it's also for design. We recently designed a better medical catheter. So this is a tube with which you draw fluids out of the human body. And it's in fact one of the biggest sources of infection in hospitals. If you're admitted to hospitals and you get this tube, it's very likely you will get infected. So how can we remove these infections? What we did was a very simple mechanism where we designed these triangular shapes inside the pipe, and we optimally determined what is the best shape of the triangles to minimize bacteria swimming upstream into the human body. Because these triangular shapes with fluid turbulences were able to stop the bacteria from swimming upstream and push them further down. And with this, we were able to reduce bacterial contamination 100 times. That's a huge reduction. And we were able to do all this with just AI. Without going to do physical experiments, AI just internally simulated what would the fluid flow look like. How does the bacteria swim upstream? How can we design the best shapes to minimize that? AI was able to do all that. And then came a physical validation. So we went into the lab, 3D printed, and tested and confirmed that it does reduce bacterial contamination. Rather, it reduces the bacteria swimming upstream. And thus, AI can do things virtually. It can internally simulate all kinds of complex physical processes and be able to come up with better inventions and designs and make a big impact on the benefits for humanity. And hence, in conclusion, I think the future is really bright for the use of AI in science, engineering, medicine, public health. We can have a huge positive impact on this world. We can really think about AI not just providing high-level ideas with text models, but having embodiment, having a robotic body going and interacting with the real world. Being able to do complex reasoning tasks like proving theorems. Being able to internally simulate how the weather in this planet could change. How, with increased carbon dioxide, would the climate of this planet change? And then how do we design technologies that can mitigate climate change and help us to create a better future? Thank you.